Nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue à cette troisième conférence du cycle Energeia de la Maison de l'Architecture. Les conditions sanitaires nous jouent toujours des tours, mais nous continuons toujours notre programmation avec la même énergie et le même souci de qualité. Nous sommes ce soir à la fois sur Facebook et YouTube, et je vous souhaite la bienvenue sur ces plateformes et vous invite à poser vos questions via ces plateformes également. Ce soir, nous avons le grand plaisir d'accueillir Anna Heringer, personnalité passionnante de l'architecture durable, sociale et participative. Après des études à Linz, en Autriche, Anna s'installe dans le sud de l'Allemagne, à Laufen. Elle se fait rapidement connaître par une approche personnelle et très réussie de l'architecture qui élargit la définition du terme local, au-delà des seuls matériaux à disposition, en incluant les personnes, les communautés, les savoir-faire et les traditions culturelles. Son séjour d'une année au Bangladesh, à l'âge de 19 ans, est fondateur dans sa compréhension de ces enjeux, dans la nécessité d'une architecture adaptée au lieu, dans tous les sens du terme, et lui permet de développer une approche sensible qui allie la beauté à la qualité de vie. Ses projets, notamment l'école Métis à Rudrapur ou Anandaloy à Dipchika, l'amènent de pays, en Chine, au Zimbabwe, au Ghana, et sont autant de manifestes qui lui valent à la fois de nombreux prix, dont le prix Aga Khan en 2007, et l'opportunité d'enseigner à Harvard, l'ETH Zurich, Munich et Madrid. Le choix de présenter le travail d'Anna Heringer dans ce cycle nous a semblé une évidence, tant l'énergie est présente partout et sous des formes plurielles dans son travail. Nous sommes très heureux de vous inviter à la rencontrer ce soir et parcourir son monde, notre monde, en sa compagnie. Je lui passe avec plaisir la parole et vous souhaite une excellente soirée. Anna.
Bonsoir. Thank you very much for the introduction and welcome to Laufen, to the Austrian-German border. Yes, architecture for me is a tool to improve lives. Unfortunately, also the opposite is true. Architecture can destroy. We deal with a lot of resources, with lots of materials, also with lots of money. And this gives us a lot of responsibility as planner. And I think, I firmly believe we can do better than we are doing now at the moment, better than the status quo. I'm an idealist. I think, we should really reach for a more ideal state that we have at the moment. We should not wreck our planet with our profession. And I believe we can build buildings and at the same time build up and foster a better society, a more stronger and just society, while doing this also in being in harmony with the nature. So somehow my slides, no. Yes, this picture shows students from ETH Zurich. It was the end of October in the mountains in Austria, in Vorarlberg. Yeah, end of October is cold. There was still frost on the ground at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we challenged the group that with the fact that we didn't have any accommodation booked for the night, no hut, no nothing. And it was the challenge now to build a shelter with whatever you could find. And the results were kind of mixed. Of course, there were the groups, Swiss, there are some outdoor freaks that said, yeah, we're going to build a hut and we're even able to sleep in then. And then there was the group B was thinking, there must be a plan B, but there was no plan B. And the group C was more or less shocked. But we all did it. It was really cold, but it was a great learning experience to reconnect ourselves very physically also with, with the very essence of our profession, to protect, to give shelter, and also to find out that there are a lot of resources given by nature for free. And all we need is the sensitivity to see those resources and the creativity to use them. And I learned that in Bangladesh as well. I was there with 19 years old, just after school, as a development learner for development work. And what I learned from my host organization, from Dipchika, was that the most effective strategy for resilience and for sustainable development is always to really cherish the resources that you have readily available at your place, and how to make and making the best out of them with your own means, with your network, with your friends, and not getting depending on external factors. And this is what I did then 7 years later with my diploma project, the Métis School. I planned for this very village a school. And in terms of building materials, I didn't have to look far. They were right under my feet, the mud, the bamboo that was growing all around. And as energy source, we had buffaloes, we had cows, and we had people. When we think of energy sources, we think of oil, we think of sun, we think of wind. But to me, the most important energy resource is all of us, is people. And we are a growing resource. We are almost 8 billion people. And I mean, every one of us wants to be needed, wants to do a meaningful work. And I think architecture can really include a lot of people. So for me, my main concern is always also to create work with the projects, and very inclusive one. This is the school after 6 months of construction. And for the realization, I had a partner, Eke Roswak, with me. And this is the ground floor. And through this bolt hole that you can see in the back wall, you come to the caves area. And the briefing of the client was to build a school or to design a school where children love to go in and where they open up their senses. So I just channeled my inner child and was trying to remember, the places that I loved when I was a kid. And I think a kid from Bavaria is in the end not so much different from a child in Bangladesh. I think we all have this archaic pattern somehow saved in our DNA. This kind of very protective, warm-like atmosphere, the very cozy one. But still the notion of having the overview. I think probably most of us have memories where we're sitting in a crown of a tree where we are protected, no one sees us, but we see everything, from a good viewpoint, or we are under a table, the tablecloths are down and protecting us from the views of the others, but we can hear everything. So these kind of situations are always the most interesting ones, and this one was what I also wanted to create in this kind of caves. So the school is a little bit orientated towards Montessori, but has its own concept, but it's a little bit similar to that, and different pace of learning is respected. So when some children are very fast in doing the works, and then what's usually happening, they're getting kind of itchy and, and disturbing the others, and the other get pressure that they're not that fast as the smart ones. So instead of doing that, they can just grab a book and retreat in the caves and read a while and work on their own. They also do meditate a lot in that school. So the caves are used for that too, and of course for playing. And in opposite kind of to the feeling of this very introverted cave, there is the treehouse story, the top floor, that is kind of this very light atmosphere. You're in the crowns of the trees and you have this light filtered in through these bamboo letters, and then this very colorful bright saris above the heads. The children all signed with their names on the floors, on the doors, and they rightfully did so because they also helped building the school. That was very much a hope and a dream of mine that the future users are really participating in building the school. So in the afternoon, after the normal classes, they came on the site. Usually they would have creative sessions like clay modeling, for example. So they had clay modeling in rather large scale, in 1-to-1 building scale. And I also made sure that they did real work, because really everyone wants to do something. I mean, every children, they prefer rather to do some real work to help the mother or the father rather than, playing with the plastic tools next to them. So it's something, to be included in the everyday life and to be taken serious is something wonderful. And of course, you cannot do this on every site and with every material. But this is why I love mud so much, because it's an utterly inclusive material. You don't need to use any tools that could harm you. And everyone knows the feeling, having the hands in the wet clay is just wonderful, sensual, and it's a joy. So this was really something where we could include a lot of people, the children, of course, men and women, and also people with disabilities. And I guess you can all imagine how it feels after 6 months standing in front of the school as a small boy or a small girl, knowing that, hey, I did this school, I built this with just using my muscles and the dirt underneath my feet, that gives such an enormous boost in your own confidence, in your own resources, but also confidence in the team, in the community, and of course also in the local materials. And this is important because especially mud has a very bad image. Falsely, because mud can resist times for centuries. I mean, we have in every climate zone, on every continent, we have buildings that are a few hundred years old, built out of mud. But it has this image to be extremely vulnerable. But I like this vulnerability, this that is caused by being water soluble. But without this vulnerability, you couldn't take it from the ground. You couldn't recycle it endlessly without any loss of quality. And that's the only material that can do that. And you can return it back to the ground it came from and plant your garden on top of it. If you kind of counteract this vulnerability and don't accept this vulnerability, you also counteract the sustainability and the circle of life. And I think that shows a little bit the core issue of our relationship with sustainability, because building really sustainable means building in harmony with the natural circles, and that includes death and decay. And that, of course, is a big taboo in our society. We don't like to hear about it, but I think it's something we can embrace, and it's just starting a new life. So the Métis School is hit every year by horizontal monsoon rains since 2005, and the walls are standing strong. So all you need is a good foundation, a good roof, and then it can last for a very long time. In terms of economic sustainability, my main question is always who gets the profit, this cui bono question. It's not about low cost, and it's always the question, who gets the profit? And in the end of my life, when I'm adding up all the building budgets that I went through my hands as an architect, I want to be able to tell myself that it ended there where people really needed it, and not just, in making rich people even more rich. So for me, it's a big question of social justice and the choice of building materials and processes. I, of course, also lived in that village. So in the end of the day, every worker got the salary, their share of building budget, and then together we went very often by bicycle then to the local market, and I could see how they spent their share of building budget. And they would invest it in vegetables from the neighbor, get a new haircut and bicycle repaired, new sari plies from the tailor. That means, that the building budget did not have just a school building as an effect, but it also was a catalyst for local development. And that was the point that made me most happy, because if I had built the school with concrete and steel, this money would have been lost for the community and just be exported. Local materials, local energy sources, and global knowledge, that is kind of the underlying approach that I have for every project. So I think, local materials and energy sources, that should be really a regional solution. But knowledge is something that should be globally accessible. There should be no boundaries. And with our digital tools, we can access this know-how everywhere. And that's a wonderful thing. So for me, that's a perfect combination. But then taking this knowledge and know-how and kind of applying it to the local context and making the best out of it. That is what I'm trying to do, not just with architecture, but also with textiles. I started a textile project as well. And we also took part in the Architecture Biennale. So I'm also not doing it as a fashion designer or something like this, but I'm doing it as an architect, because I see that we all shape spaces, not just architects and urban planners and blah, 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 but every one of us is constantly shaping spaces with every shirt, with every piece of clothes, and of course, other goods as well, that we shop, we create spaces, or there's a spatial impression somewhere or imprint somewhere. And mostly our clothes have spaces kind of attached with that we would like to live in. And it's really, it's kind of a huge rural to urban migration, because all the labor force from the rural areas is kind of dragged into a few spots of textile hubs where there are just ending too many people, and there can't be enough, humane conditions for hosting so many people. this is where the women usually come from, the workers come from. They come from a village where they can build their homes out of the materials that they find all around with the help of the network, the families. The children have the most fantastic playground, which is the entire village. The air quality is super good, which is not the case in the big cities at all. Elderly people are integrated. You can have your cows, your goats, your little house garden. But the problem is that the land scarcity is so high, the land sources in relationship to the population numbers is just getting really critical. So you don't have, as a family, you don't have enough land anymore to support your living, your livelihood. So you need to have a second economic leg to live off. And this leg is something that we try to provide with our project Dip the Textile, so that the women can stay in their village. And as the same time as, or the same approach that we have in architecture, we look at the local resources, the local potentials, and the richness of the textile culture. When we think of made in Bangladesh, we think of this kind of very basic made t-shirt. In fact, Bangladesh is famous for beautiful textile culture. So our project is based on this culture, and also based on this upcycling culture that they have in Bangladesh. They are masters in that. So a woman usually gets one piece of cloth in the rural areas, one sari. The men get the skirts. In comparison, in Germany, I don't know about the numbers in Switzerland, but in Germany, one person gets 60 pieces of clothes per year. So they get one, and then they don't throw it away when it's worn out. They just keep it, and then they put it into layers, and then with a lot of hand stitches, they form it in or make it into blankets, and then they sleep on top of their blankets. They have this sack of straw, and then you also see it in the background, and then the family sleeps on top of these blankets, and then the whole family history kind of unwraps again, or unfolds. So the first layer is maybe off, and then the second layer comes, this pink sari, that was the year when I was pregnant with my first daughter. Or then, the lungi, the skirt of the man is coming out, and you remember that was a difficult year, that was when the water buffalo stepped on the feet, and it was difficult. And so the whole story comes out again, and before these blankets kind of are completely torn, they come into our workshop, and the women manufacture or fabricate them into a fashion for the European market. And it's also kind of a symbol, that because we always think, to get a good product, a good life quality, we always have to engrave for new resources. We have to seek for more, exploiting even more things. But we also can't just take the existing and add another layer of craftsmanship, another layer of design and creativity, and we can have a wonderful quality with the existing. We also started to document our architectural project on those blankets, the Métis School. This is one of my favorites. It's a portrait of the village by the women who also live, of course, in that village. And the blue dots that you see around here, these are ponds, not just for fish cultivation to contribute to the nutrition, but these are also the excavation holes for the building materials, for the mud, for the earth, for the houses. And the dark green spots are the bamboo forest, this kind of almende area where you can grow your bamboo that you need for the houses. And then, of course, you have, all the food cultivation all around. So this kind of very closed and small material circles is something we can only learn from with this kind of sustainability. Unfortunately, there's a lot of interference now. I was there in last November. And I was so sad because the government is running right now a program where they distribute tin houses for free. And of course, people are tearing down now their traditional houses and replace them with these tin shacks. And it's just an incredible loss of sustainability as well as beauty and culture. And we are trying to find out ways, to upgrade in a better way, in a more sustainable and more authentic way than the tin shacks. Yeah, with the textile projects, we first thought, we keep it completely decentral. Women could take the clothes and work from home. But then we saw that the women so much enjoyed to come together and also to tell them our husbands, no, by. I'm working now. I'm going to the studio. And so we understood we need a place for them. At the same time, we were asked to build a center for people with disabilities, the Ananda Loy Center. And this is the plan for it, the ground floor. And unlike the other buildings that are built in that village that are all very much a precise rectangular box, I wanted this building breaking out of the mold, dancing, because I think, it's important to show that it's something extremely beautiful, that we are not following all the same pattern, the same norm, that there are people that are different, and that this diversity is something that is something to celebrate and something really utterly beautiful. So this building is kind of trying to transmit this message, the elevation. This is how it looks now. And when you approach the building, the first thing that you see is a ramp that is winding up all around the building. And already during the construction site, it was a big discussion, why do you need a ramp? It's the only ramp in that area. And then you're immediately at the discussion about inclusiveness and why it is important to have inclusion in our society. And this is what I love about architecture as well a lot, is that it makes things visible and also sheds light on maybe minorities that are usually overlooked. And this is the case with people with disabilities. There's quite a high number out of the poverty, because women have to work until really, really late in the pregnancy. And of course, malnutrition. As a woman, you get the last pieces that are left over, usually from, the family food. So this causes a high number of disabilities in that rural areas. And there was not, it's very often seen as kind of punishment, or like, you did something wrong in your last life. It's a bad karma that you brought in. So it's something you're trying to hide. And often people with disabilities are really hidden away, also because no one has time really to care for them, because everyone is needed on the fields. And there was no knowledge at all existing that there are ways to make therapies, and to improve the situation. And now I had really time to spend time with the families who have family member with disabilities. And it was just so wonderful to experience how happy they are that they not just have a place where they can go, but that they have a place, that is known all over, because the people, it's a very unusual building for the people in that area with these curves and everything. And so to have a certain dignity and pride, this is our building. And also, I met, for example, one girl that I know since a long time in the village, and I could never build up a relationship with her or, talk with her, because she was always completely defensive. When you wanted to talk to her, she was no. And then, like 2 hours later, she came to the center and was completely changed. She radiated with a big smiles, holding hands and chatting and completely open. It was just because she knew she's welcome here and that they have a good place to be. And that's, I think, something very important. The places underneath the ramp are different. The caves are different than in the Métis school. It's also part of the therapy. You can crawl from the ground, into these caves, and it's more, you have to move your body. You have to coordinate your muscles. So it's a kind of a training also to move yourself through the spaces. But of course, it's much more interesting as if you have, a therapeutic tool where you do the same exercise again and again. We hear the light is coming in with a special atmosphere, and then, and then you can play because one child is coming from that corner and the other one is coming from that loophole. So it's a very specific atmosphere in here. And of course, you can also escape the therapist, which is also maybe sometimes a good thing. And then, this is how the ramp is gliding up, all in mud and bamboo. And the top floor, the veranda, is also used for working. And this is the place of the women of Dipty textiles. And usually as an architect, you're responsible for the building. But in my case, I'm also responsible for the program. And I would be super happy if I was in Geneva. I would have my large suitcase with me and would try to sell you a lot of pillows to support our project. Unfortunately, can't do this, but we have a website, and I would be really happy if you support our project, because we couldn't survive without, if we don't find people who enjoys this kind of textiles. Yeah, going back to architecture, this is a project in China, also in a rural area. It's the Bamboo Biennale, where several architects were invited to build with bamboo and to show what, the capacity of this material is. And I'm often asked, hey, Anna, do you want to send us back to Stone Age with all these old materials? But I think, it's not a question how old a material is. You still can, use a modern language for that. And it's definitely not a matter of the age of the material, but it's a matter of our creative ability to use it in a way that we meet the needs and aspiration of our contemporary society. And this, it's youth hostel, so you have an inner core out of earth and stones, and then you have the staircase, you have all the utility units in the center, and then attached to it, like tents or like Chinese lamp shades, you have then the sleeping concons. And this is how the weaving pattern. So it's a very open bamboo structure. And it's just that kind of, just keeps or defines the space, the indoor space, but the rest is you have a very small space only that is really protected from rain and so on, like tents basically. Yeah, this is an equation that I always keep in mind. It should be times 8 billion already, but I wrote this a few years back, and for me it's always a reminder how fast our world's population is growing. The world won't change with one big decision. The world is changing with the everyday small decisions that we're taking. And designing is constant decision making. Are we taking this material, this insulation material, maybe this styrofoam, or are we taking the hemp or the straw? Are we deciding for the concrete, the steel, or are we going more for timber and rammed earth? This paint or no paint at all, letting it age. So these are all the decisions that are maybe small decisions and small amounts for one house. But if everyone was taking the same decision, that's for me always the question: how would our planet look like? How would the resources be distributed? How would our society look like? Would it be a just society, or would it just create more and more injustice? Yeah, the name is called now a bit tricky, Omicron hotspot even. That was a few years back that we named this project like this. Actually, that's the name of the company, Omicron Electronics in Vorarlberg in West Austria. And the company supported several of my projects, also in Zimbabwe and in Bangladesh. And they wanted to have, part of this atmosphere in their headquarters in Austria. And I got the commission together with Martin Rauch. So we transformed a courtyard of a large office building with earth. And it's a really monolithic, very introverted structure, but it's highly in use. It's really a space where you can completely retreat from all the communications, from the constant, flow of facts and data, and you can just, really retreat. And the building itself is just the opposite. It's very transparent, and also the culture in this company is very open. There's a lot of communication going on. So we wanted to create one small spot where people can really just focus and re-anchor themselves, in somehow with their intuition, and just feel themselves again. So there are like niches for power naps, but also for small conversation. And I got just back the Zeppelin that you see on the right side. This is also illuminating the space in the evenings, but this is also a space for meetings or where you can hang out. And it's all built in timber and local mud. And especially the monolith is just built, taking the wet mud and shaping it by your own hand. It's a wonderful feeling to build, when you physically feel the shape and you shape it with your hands. And it's one of the oldest construction technique globally. It's also one of the cheapest ones, just not in our economic context. It's just the opposite. It's one of the most expensive ones. And I always thought, in the beginning, you cannot build with earth here because it's so expensive. No, this is not the mistake of the earth, which is given by nature for free, which is a free excavation material that we have on every site that we now pay for to dump it. It's the problem of our economic system that we have very low taxes on oil and all these materials that need a lot of energy, like concrete and so on. And we have comparatively high taxes on the human energy, on craftsmanship, on human labor. And I believe, if you really want to scale up and push the sustainability level of future construction, and we have to another level, then we have to readjust our economic system. Good news is that this is not a force of nature, it's man-made, so we can change it. And I'm strongly advocating for a carbon tax. I'm also building now a larger campus for the church, for the Catholic Church in Bavaria, in Campus St. Michael. And this is our Center for Sustainability, also in rammed earth, and then a timber structure boarding hostel or school next to it. These are the plans. This is kind of lots of co-working spaces where organization, not just from the church, but everyone who is kind of working with social or ecological sustainability can share the spaces and the resources and kind of interact. And of course, you cannot rotate with water buffaloes in that context. These are the prefabricated elements from the Ricola Reuterzentrum in Basel, designed by Herzog Dömeron. And the technique that Martin Rauch developed is prefabricated rammed earth elements. This is kind of the factories where these elements are produced. You see it here. This is like a large kind of 3D rammer or a 3D plotter or rammer kind of that rams a long rammed earth wall, and then it's cut into several blocks. And the nice thing is, that would be my dream, that we have a lot of local earth factories all around, as we have it also in the concrete industry. So local factories where all the excavation material, I heard that in Geneva, you're extending, this tunnel with this CERN thing. So there's a lot of excavation happening in Geneva. It would be wonderful to take this material, not dump it somewhere, but to take it, to put it into a earth factory, to ram it, and then to take out this kind of blocks and to build your buildings with it. And, you might think this is an utopia, but this has been possible 500 years ago. Of course, low tech. This is Shibam in Yemen. And why would we not be able to use this material in an appropriate way now with all the technical know-how and all the research that we have? We should be able to do it today as well, also in dense urban spaces. Another project with Martin Rauch in Rosenheim, the town I was born. It's an extension of an Ayurveda center, and it is a load-bearing timber structure. It's placed in an alluvial forest, so willow trees are all around. So we also wanted to include a willow facade here, and to make sure that the building is really nestling in the kind of in the background or in the context in the forest. It's not like something that is kind of really strong architecture, but we wanted to have it like really nestling in and winding in the nature. And here you see those blocks where you see the factory before. So we also used a lot of earthen structures inside for acoustic reasons, also for balancing the indoor humidity, because it's a health center. And it's extremely healthy to live in that material because it constantly balances the indoor humidity on a perfect level for human health. And here you see it already retouched, the wall. So it comes in blocks, and then it gets, with good craftsmanship, retouched, and it looks completely monolithic. And we also wanted to kind of show a happy frugality. It's something, that we always think that a good lifestyle is related to big square meters, quantity. but we can also go for quality. And I think we should, I mean, our land is a precious resource. We should not, seal our land with architecture. We should rather, try to be as small as possible and then really refine the surfaces. And here you see the ramped earth, you see clay plasters, and there's also the floor is clay casein. Also the furniture is wood on clay casein. And there is a lot of sensitivity and sensuality also in these surfaces. And a lot of people who come here are feeling quite vulnerable, feel, not perfect because their health is causing problems. They are overloaded mentally. So I think, being surrounded also with imperfect materials like earth and natural materials are not perfect. They're always, are irregular, and there are cracks and they're aging. But I think this does does us good, on a soul level also, to be surrounded with these materials. And I've seen it with so many structures that I've built, that people are constantly touching the earth walls, even in an intuitive way. Even if they're super gray and they look like concrete, people are on the phone and suddenly, touching the walls. And we usually don't go around our cities and caressing the walls and the facades. So I think, we are perceiving materials not just on a visual level, but also with more senses. And the earth is just so much more than a building material. It's a real element. And humankind grew up with this material in such a close relationship. So I think it's touching us somehow deeply. Yeah, timber, fibers, earth, I think these are the materials in our context to build with. We stay a little bit in the Alpine region. It's in the Bregenzer Wald in Vorarlberg as well, a birth space. It was the commission of a women's museum. They wanted to create more, more awareness about the topic of birth, giving birth. And the weird thing is that we have spaces for almost everything, but not so much for giving birth. Usually we decide between giving birth at home or we go to the hospital. And now imagine, we are a baby in a mother's womb, it's all cozy and dark. And then suddenly you come out in this super bright light. And then also as a woman, you're surrounded with materials that are extremely hygienic, but you don't want to touch them at all. It's, something you don't feel you want to open your senses. But giving birth is all about opening up. So we wanted to create a situation where this is possible, because the moment of giving birth, it's very influential, of course, for everyone's biography. We didn't find any large sponsors for it, but we found more than 400 women who sponsored us and thought, this is an important topic. We want to have this prototype. And they also sponsored their time. So they came and was a participator process. We built it out of earth and straw bricks. And then, of course, you need to cover it in this climate. So the baby got the traditional shingles, just in a little bit different wipes and colors. That's the ground floor. Here you see it also painted on the floor. So this project was designed together with Anka Dürr, who is also not just an architect, but a midwife, and Martin Rauch and Sabrina Sommer. And this is how the birth space looks like. It's a lot about using also the vertical for giving birth, and how to have specific tools, where you physically can kind of work with the gravity and everything. And the senses are, the surfaces are all really warm and archaic. And it's an archaic moment. It's a very special, it gets us to the basics, I think, this moment of giving birth. It's also made for discussions and workshops. So there is this kind of discussion round composed in front of it. Also an urban garden with medical plants specifically for the female body. And this is how it is located right now in the mountains. It should, of course, ideally be located close to a hospital. That was also during the pandemic that we built this structure. And of course, it was the first lockdown. And you think, how will we also be able to give birth to a new kind of awareness and new kind of architecture as well? And I was just thinking to myself, I would hope that architecture becomes also more female, not meaning more women necessarily, but more female. It was so much about exploiting new resources, you know, and bigger and faster, and always the new is exciting, the new materials. But I think we also have to care for the existing, and also caring for a good process, and also bring in more empathy into architecture. So I hope this is coming along sometimes. The project in Ghana, I will be there on Saturday. I'm excited to go back to Ghana. And the master plan you see on the left side is the master plan we got from Ghana, from a Ghanaian architect. But of course, this has nothing to do with Africa or the culture there that you see on that's the surrounding in Tatale, in the village. It's all this vibrant kind of composition out of round huts, square ones, and then courtyards. And then it gets all lost when it comes to institutes. This is for Don Bosco, for the Catholic Church. So this is kind of decades of missionary time, of colonialism, and of course, development aid. That we thought, you know, we have to build proper buildings, of course, with proper building materials and not with the vernacular ones, and also not in these shapes. So I was literally taking this master plan and transforming it and twisting it into a structure that is kind of reflecting this richness of the courtyard situations in the village. So here you have the village for the hostels, for the teachers. And then this is kind of the educational campus where you have the schools. This is what we are trying to finish in the next 2 weeks. And this is the one that we start. It's a school for sustainable construction techniques that we are trying to start. Here you see how I'm working. I love working on large clay models. I usually always design on clay models, never on a computer. And then it goes just, you know, sketches, just 1-to-1 scale to the site. Katharina Kohlroser, the manager on the site. And this is how it grows up. So the last project I want to show, it's the cathedral in Worms. It had the 1,000-year-old, 1,000 years anniversary a couple of years ago. And for this occasion, the community wanted to give the church a new altar. It was still the temporary altar after the Second Council of the Vatican. And it was, the community could never decide for an altar, because the difficulty was that the background or the space, the chorus, is built by and designed by Balthasar Neumann. So what do you put in front of Balthasar Neumann is very difficult task. But for the 1,000-year-old birthday, they thought, okay, now we have to tackle this issue. And then in the final round of the competition that I did with Martin Rauch together, were like two paradigms. You know, there was one beautifully designed steel altar that would have been kind of produced somewhere else and then brought in as a ready-made object. And we said, we're not coming with the object, we're coming with the tools. And we take the local material and the people, and we all start together to ram this altar. Because in the end, you know, it's the table where the community meets to celebrate. So really everyone participated, from, you know, the choir, from the altar boys and girls, and, you know, the council and churchgoer, even people who have nothing to do with the church. They heard it in the radio and came because, like, they were excited to leave some historical traces there. And this is how we rammed. You see the beautiful background of Balthasar Neumann. It was a hard work, and it was good that it was not an easy thing. I believe, you know, participation has to be a bit physical. You know, we always think, you know, participation is deciding for version option A or option B, but this is just a head-born thing. But you're not physical in this thing, but there is so much power in the physical process. You know, in the past, communities got together to build the church, to build the city hall, or to build a school, or help each other building their houses. And this non-verbal communication on the site, or when you work hand in hand and, you know, having one aim, that is so important, that really bonds us together as a society. And we don't have that anymore. But this is what I really saw so much happening in building in Bangladesh, for example, that when you build a building, you also have the chance at the same time to build up a strong community. And this is something we have forgotten, and we have to relearn, because we have a lot of people who are alone, who feel lonely, who are feeling excluded. And processes like this are important for are healthy for our society. We also brought in historical elements in the altar from the Roman Empire. And of course, the kids also were there on the side to help mixing the mud or stomping it with their feet. And much to the dismay of the priest, they brought in pink glitter. The priest was slightly worried that the altar would glitter in pink in the end, which was not the case, luckily. And this was the moment when the altar got out of the eggshell. And you see the moment it was our baby. Everyone felt part of it. And also, it was not just the historic elements that got in. A lot of personal items went in, postcards, necklaces, the best wine of the region. It became more and more a personal object of really the community. And you see totally different people, but we were all so much connected through this process. And for me, this picture is very symbolic for our society. With all this gold in the background, we are not lacking materials. We are not lacking any material aspects, but we are lacking good relationships and meaning in life. And I think this is what the architecture can also kind of provide. And I think this is a power, a social power, that we shouldn't delegate and just to experts. We should really include much more participation in our projects. Form follows what? Form follows function, I think, is so much outdated. There are so many functional buildings all around. There are also good-looking buildings all around. But what we really need are meaningful buildings and beautiful buildings. And of course, that's a big topic and a big question. What is beauty? But to me, beauty is a formal expression of love. And if we build and design out of love towards the others, and towards, out of love towards the planet and its resources, we very naturally also do it sustainably. So for me, my hope for the future is that we replace form follows function with form follows love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was a very excellent lecture. A lot of pleasure. We received a few questions, so if you're okay with that, we're going to go with the first one. First question is following a little bit your dream, your ideal. What are your next projects? How would you imagine to push it even further, what you are doing now, or maybe what would be the ideal project for you?
I would love to build a skyscraper in Manhattan out of mud. Or Geneva. No, it doesn't have to be a skyscraper, but I would love to build in a real urban context, because I think, it would be just so great if you have all these hard materials all around, and then suddenly an earth shoot is coming out of the ground. It would be just fantastic. I think it would, bring so much more touchiness and that natural atmosphere in the cities, and I think we would need that. So this is one thing that I'm working on also with Martin Rauch, on the opposite of a birth space. It's on a graveyard. It's a new form of, a new approach how to mourn and how to remember. I'm continuing with the Ghana project, of course. That will be a long way to go, many years. And of course, Bangladesh will always be. So I'm trying now with students also in Liechtenstein to find ways to find better ways, to upgrade the housing situation of the people with the same amount of money that the government is spending now on the houses, but with more sustainability and of course with earth. So I'm also teaching, because I think it's important. Scaling up is important through people, through teaching. And yeah, the textiles will always be there, because I can't let the women down. And yeah, I will just follow my gut feeling. I won't do single family houses. That's one thing I won't do for sure.
Thanks. We have another question. You were talking about these textiles and how you want to raise funds. Who are your clients in these particular projects, like in Ghana or in Bangladesh?
So Bangladesh started, that was my family. They were my friends. So I lived with them for 1 year. And then I was in need for a diploma project, and they were in need for school. So we kind of paired the two things. And then I was collecting funds through carol singing campaigns. So I was literally going from door to door and singing to get the money in. Now my daughter is doing it, but I did it last 2 years ago. So I still went. And, so the clients are often NGOs, and in Ghana, it's Don Bosco. And sometimes, it's partially also, you're responsible also for fundraising. But we as architects, we are used to spend a lot of hours in competitions that we eventually lose or not. And I prefer to initiate my own projects. And of course, in the beginning, it had to be really me pushing often, but now people are approaching. But it's a rare case that people come and saying, hey, we have a super good budget and let's go. It's all, or even creating a program. Now I was the past few months, we were really eagerly trying to find good trainers for agricultural project, for our Ghana project. So this is, you're never just the architect, you're kind of a conductor of many things.
Thanks. Another question from Niels on YouTube, a more precise question about one of the projects, the bamboo hostels in China. We saw this web of bamboo, and if we understand correctly, there is a mud structure underneath. Is it protected from the rain?
No, it's not protected from rain, but it's no problem. You have to have either a good roof, or you have kind of horizontal speed breakers and a good mix in the mud. It's like, imagine a hill that has no rocks and no trees, then the water is running down in a high speed, and that is causing the erosion. It's more the speed of the water, not the water itself. The same is with the mud facade. So it needs kind of horizontal speed breakers on the facade. This could be lines of mortar, or it could be bricks that kind of sticking out a bit, or shingles, or anything that kind of prevents the water running over the facade in a fast way. And then you need stones in the mix. So you would get a certain erosion, like 1 or 2 centimeters. You have to calculate it in your structural engineering. You calculate this few centimeters more, and then the facade is getting rough, and then the erosion stops, because the roughness is also causing slowing down of the erosion and the water. And when the mud is getting wet, what is happening is that the clay particles expand, and the water cannot penetrate deep in the wall. So that means it's just on the surface, and on the surface you have all the stones that are kind of stabilizing the facade. So it's kind of really working well. And adding cement or other stabilizers would just cause that the water can penetrate deep in the wall, and then you have the frost and all these problems. So it's much better just to take the raw earth.
Thank you. Another question, more general again. What we're thinking, and where everybody's is worried about the energy crisis and all this stuff. Do you think participation and the local mud are appropriate to be to an input in a larger scale?
I think in acupunctural doses, you can have also in the Center for Sustainability in Traunstein that I'm building in Bavaria, we have certain elements that will be built in a participatory way, but of course not the load-bearing ones and not the structural ones. But there will be always, in every project, I'm trying to bring in some elements. So you have a sense of ownership also as users. And I think this is possible. I mean, it's part of our DNA that we want to build, I mean, every child plays building a house, a nest, in the childhood. I don't know anyone who didn't play building somehow in one form or the other. So it's really part of our human DNA. And now we kind of delegate that completely towards other people and experts. And that what's happening is, before the users move in, the architects try to document the you know, the places, because they know exactly, you know, what's happening next is that the users are running to IKEA or all the other interior shops and, you know, buying all this stuff and you know, for kind of trying to satisfy the need for building the nest. But this is a very consumption orientated approach to this notion of building. And I think it would be much more clever to include people in the building process. It could be also in a classroom. You know, you have one large clay plastering wall that you do with ornaments, that you do with different pigments, that you do with a relief. You know, the kids could easily do that, and it's just a plastering. It's not a load-bearing structure. And you would have a much better indoor quality. I mean, air quality. It would add to your health. The children would feel proud of it, and they would also get an awareness how it is to live in natural building materials.
About these materials, some people are not used, we are not used anymore to clay, to mud, to earth. And we have another question on YouTube. Someone who is questioning the hygienic issue of an earth wall concerning contamination, microbes, parasites.
Yeah, the mud walls are super dry. They're drier than wood. And there's not, you know, you need a good foundation that prevents the water from you know, coming up from the ground. And then they are super dry. And there are many examples where people, you know, are allergic to everything. And the only thing they could stand was the earth. And also, for example, the Ricola Kräuterzentrum in Basel, that is, I mean, the Ricola herbs, of course, they are pharmaceutic, they're registered as a pharmaceutic medicine. Oh, and so they have very strict rules, and and even that was okay. So also there, the walls are just pure earth, and that is fine. So it's much more healthy. You know, I would say it's a healthy dirt. It's much more healthy than anything else. Also, you know, in terms of molds and so on, it's so dry that there will be no mold. And even if you have your bathroom, I have clay plasters in my bathroom. And even if you shower for a long time, you never have the mirror, you know, blurred with this foggy dew kind of things. So it's really, it can balance the humidity perfectly, and that also prevents the molding.
Excellent. Anna, thank you very much. We have no more questions from our audience. So I would like again to thank you so much. Thank you to the audience, Facebook and YouTube. And
thank you.
We see you next time for the next lecture. Take care, everyone. And have a great evening. Thank you, Anna, again so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Au revoir.